Good. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. I am Brian Lusk. We're going to get started in just a moment here, but I thought we would take a look at a thread that was posted back in June of 2023. David Patrikarakos visited the front lines back in June and followed a soldier to a resupply point and to the front lines. I thought it would be interesting to watch and listen to what he said, starting with this delivery of supplies to his comrades.
Through the battlefield now, going up to the front of the line of contact to deliver the drones. Oh shit, can you hear that? We are right on the front there.
I do, by the way, language warning.
Okay. You can hear that. Absolutely hear that. Okay, we're running. I tell you, it's not fair, it's just being out of shape. Okay, he's telling me to hurry up. Okay, so
Not fair being out of shape. I have a great deal of sympathy for that statement. But this is a longer thread, so I'm going to go ahead and post the link to it in the comments here. And we're still going to go through it, but thought that you might want to look at it later at some point in time. So they set out in the battalion 4x4 and headed to the front, and they began to realize what they were driving towards.
smoke just billowing up ahead of us now. All around us now, everywhere. Yeah, you can see what we're driving to now. Look at
They're getting closer to the forest, and it's about to get a lot more intense as they go. They enter the so-called Forest of Surprises and see the utter destruction Russia has wrought. They've burned so much of the forest. Look what they've done to my country, says, I think it's Dime or Dime, but I'm not sure which. If they cannot take Ukraine, they will destroy everything in it.
that, look at that. Everywhere we go, destruction, smoke, damage that Russians have brought to this country.
Heading through the forest, then, they find that there is a wooden box in the way that they see as they walk, and they're warned not to touch it because it's likely booby-trapped.
Okay, you gotta be careful there. I think I recently fractured my foot, which is not great. Yeah, you can hear the shelling going off around us. Go, 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 he's done.
Then, out of the blue, a drone suddenly appears.
Oh wow, look at that. The drone going through the thing. Drone through the forest. One of Ukraine's, and there it goes, look at that.
They finally make it to the contact line, and they were basically just telling him what they do. And the job is simple: to kill Russians. And as they were, he talks about the difficulties of running with body armor here. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
We've had to take cover a bit from all the shelling and the heavy fire, incoming fire, as I think you can hear. But Tim said that we're going to get 2 minutes. As you can see, it's still a bit, as you can hear rather, it's still a bit hot out there. So, yeah, I've just been given some Indian tonic water to drink. Very nice. So, yeah, so we're getting ready to run back. I tell you, it's the running that will kill me, nothing else. I'm in the trench.
And finally, he was, then there was, he was debating about, he thought his helmet looked too military. And so he got a black cover to go on it. And they said, well, you know, that's kind of pointless because they are in fact targeting journalists, and said it made him look like a priest instead. So the black cover came back off. And let's end off with this one.
You know, it's actually a very beautiful day. If you ignore the shit. Whoa. Whoa, did you hear that one? That was a huge one. He's telling me to go forward now. Okay, run, run, run. You know.
And I thought that was just an interesting view into the situation on the front lines through the eyes of a journalist as of June last year. The fighting is fierce, and the truth is that the options are not at this point. The options are not between surrendering to Russia and Ukraine as a free country. The options are between the total destruction of Ukraine and a fighting chance for freedom. And that's where we're at on that part. Let's go ahead and move on to the big story of the week, I guess, or the last day or so, and that is the Polish trucker convoy. Well, Polish truckers again protesting at the border. They've now shut down 6 of those of the crossing points. I believe that's all of them, including the rail line between Ukraine and Poland. Well, we'll start off with a little bit of follow-up. The grain that was spilled from the train when scattered by Polish farmers was destined for Germany and was never going to be dropped off in Poland. So they targeted a train car that had grain that wasn't even going to stay in the country in Poland at all. There's mass protests across Poland, they say, first against Ukrainian farm imports. Then it went to hunting rules. And to be honest, this sounds more like this sounds almost ginned up, like there's somebody who's working to create the circumstances and basically to try and push on the pressure points, the ones that are going to cause the fracturing of the relationship between Poland and Ukraine. But they don't care what the topic is. Grain just happens to be a reason, a topic. Then they went to these hunting rules issues. So they're well beyond their original scope, and it looks like it's getting worse. Ukraine, however, Ukrainian carriers began their own protest action at the border checkpoints with Poland in response to the blockade. You can see some signs on their own trucks right here, like this one right here. Ukraine lose, Poland lose. That means that their fates are inextricably tied together. On the morning of February 20th, protest, let me mute this part though, let me see. There we go, because it's loud, and obnoxiously loud. You can probably hear it from my headset, in fact. On the morning of February 20th, protesting Polish farmers at the border blocked the railway near Medicazeni checkpoint and spilled part of the grain from a freight train onto the tracks. You can see them doing that right now. Kyiv foresees severe impacts of Polish border blockade with 3,000 trucks stuck between the two countries. Ukraine's government claimed that the transportation blockade on its border with Poland will have severe socio-political effect for both countries. And the two countries are tied together now. Their fates are tied together. Here's the picture from the thumbnail, though. You can see here we've got the Soviet hammer and sickle being flown off the side of a tractor here with a sign that says, "Putin, put things in order with Ukraine, Brussels, and our leadership." Now, this is it certainly indicates where where certain individuals' loyalties may lie. And that's why I believe that this is being ginned up, as in falsely created and falsely pressured by Russian provocateurs. This is the guy that we all know that took the assignment too far. There's always that one guy in any working group that goes gung-ho. It's like, oh yeah, they should know exactly who we are and all this kind of stuff. And then he goes way beyond anything else. Now, if this is actually if this is actually what they wanted to have happen, as far as having their hammer and sickle and this sign put up, if the Russians wanted that, that's going to be an attempt as a cause for war. Just like the Russian-speaking people that were supposedly oppressed in Ukraine, yet that was all done by Russians. This could be the start of another cause for war, a cause to go into Poland, because clearly these truckers are looking for Russia to save them from the evil Polish government, which is my concern. But is it really what is, or is it that one guy, like I said, who takes the assignment way too seriously and goes all gung ho and all in? Or as Visegrad 24 stated, one Polish farmer is not Poland. Poland is one of Ukraine's staunchest allies, both politically and militarily, and it is home and refuge to millions of Ukrainians. Please do not judge the whole country by one banner. And the additional follow-up is that the man has already been detained and Polish authorities are taking action against him. As I understand, there are some laws in Poland about not showing the hammer and sickle, the old Soviet flag. I don't know for sure, but that's just kind of a vague rumbling I'm hearing on that one. Overall, though, the situation is that there is evidence out there that Moscow is pushing on these inflection points now. And Infor Napalm has published some of these this information. I'm going to put the link to this Telegram post as well into the comments if you want to look it up. But they distribute some archives on this showing how Moscow bought Polish radicals to conduct anti-Ukraine actions in Poland with Moscow's money. So it's getting out there. There is clearly the evidence that Moscow is behind at least parts of these protests. That doesn't mean there aren't legitimate concerns for these truckers and for these farmers. That's not what it means. What it does mean is that they are, like I said, deliberately putting pressure on those points, the points where it's going to cause the most pain and is most likely to fracture the relationship between Poland and Ukraine. The Deputy Minister of Agriculture has said that negotiations with farmers will begin on Monday, with details currently being worked out. So that's the situation on the Poland-Ukraine border yet again. This has been going on for months. It looks like we're going to be looking at a situation where it's going to continue going on at least for a while. It's rough, though, because there's actual truckers that are saying they're holding Ukrainian military assistance, and yet they can't get through these borders. They've not been able to get through at all with those types of assistance either. They're doing a lot of damage, is what they're doing. Now moving on to Ukraine, the news out of Ukraine, and this is kind of a mix right here. Kiev has said it will firmly respond if Moscow attempts to involve Transnistria in the war. If they're going to try and use that area to attack Ukraine, to try and divide their forces and cause more problems with them, they will respond firmly. That situation with Transnistria is interesting. They don't have enough Russian troops there to make a significant difference in the war. And in fact, I would contend that if they did engage in that type of warfare against Ukraine, the odds are that it would give Ukraine an excuse to go in there and wipe out the military contingent in that area. It's not a good idea, even if they think they can get away with it. Mainly because it puts people at risk that they cannot afford to allow to be put at risk. The majority of Ukrainians state they want Zelensky to remain president for the duration of martial law. That's according to a poll that was put out by the Kiev International Institute of Sociology. I don't know the methodology of that poll, but just be advised it exists. A Russian drone strike in Poltava Oblast caused fire at an industrial facility, according to Governor Philip Pronin. That required 85 firefighters to extinguish that fire right there. Russia's starting to find ways to actually target things that actually have value militarily. Any industrial facility is going to have at least some military value in that regard. It's kind of a change in what they've been doing, which has basically been indiscriminately shelling everything until they wipe it all off the map. And Ukraine returned home another 11 children from Russia and the occupied territories. So that's good news for those kids who managed to make it home to their families. Let's go ahead and move on to news out of Russia. A U.S. citizen was arrested in Russia for allegedly raising money for Ukraine. The woman was charged with, I believe it was $52. Here it is. Here's a picture of the young woman right here. She was accused of treason for transferring $51.8 to a Ukrainian fund, or $51.80. I don't like it when they write the numbers like that, but that's not my choice on that. So this woman, a Russian American dual citizenship woman, actually gave $52 to Ukraine on the first day of the war. She then, for some reason, decided that she was going to travel to Russia. And when she got there, they took her into custody. Apparently, even just a little bit of support for Ukraine is enough for Russia to look into it. Of course, $52 is a pretty big amount of money for them over there. It's a pretty big chunk of their weekly living over there in Russia. In fact, it might even be their whole week. The woman was actually a native, well, not native, but lived in Los Angeles. She is reported to have repeatedly taken place in anti-war protests when she was in the United States. Moving on to American Senator Lindsey Graham has been put on a wanted list for criminal charges. It's not specified what charges are, but it's on the list of terrorists and extremists. 4 servicemen in the Belgorod region were killed as a result of shelling. This is from February 18th, I believe, with the checkpoint hit by 17 mines, though I believe that meant artillery shells, not mines. So now that Alexei Navalny is dead, the heads of the penitentiary service were awarded new ranks. They were promoted just 3 days after the death of Alexei Navalny. Let's just say that's not exactly good optics. In the area of Crimea, there's been a lot of talk about there being so many Russians in Crimea. Well, once they took over Crimea, about 800,000 Russians moved in, displacing native people there, people who'd lived there, Ukrainians and Tatars, and often taking them, rounding them up, and shipping them into other parts of Russia for Russification. It's deliberate. Action on their part. They're going to try and replace as much of the population as they can, so that when it comes down to it, it'll be all Russians there, not Crimean or Ukrainian people. This is a follow-up on the previous news from about 2 weeks ago on the Tuapse oil refinery. The damage was so extensive, it's going to take 3 months to repair it all. So that was a significant attack that Ukraine pulled off on that refinery in Russia. So interesting. This is where Ukraine is putting the pressure on Russia's inflection points, the places where Russia is most vulnerable. Because if they can't get their oil revenue, they really don't have much else to rely on. Their arms sales have tanked. They need all of those arms for their war in Ukraine. Therefore, they're not bringing in money there to speak of. So they're having to rely on their oil income in order to pull anything off. It's pretty crazy over there in Russia. Now let's go ahead and move on to the international front. Now there's not as much going on today because I've been kind of keeping ahead of it by doing nearly daily streams. So we might be a little bit shorter today. Germany is planning to send long-range missile systems, but Taurus missiles specifically were not mentioned. The situation in Germany is getting really interesting. Now that Alexei Navalny has been killed, there's been a lot more pressure on the government. In fact, some various parties have now put forward bills into their parliament equivalent, the Bundestag, and they're trying to force Schultz to actually provide more arms to Ukraine as a punishment against Russia for their actions. The European Commission on February 20th announced the allocation of 83 million euros in humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and Moldova. 75 million of those euros are earmarked for Ukraine to provide emergency aid, including access to basic needs such as shelter, protection services, clean water, education, and healthcare. Hungary is set to ratify Sweden's NATO accession. It looks like they're going to have that vote on February 26th. Now, this is related to Ukraine because the Swedes are set to potentially send some of their Gripen fighters over to Ukraine if they have the NATO blanket to help cover them. Interesting to see, but I will believe it when I see it, because Viktor Orban has been really still trying to play off some shenanigans. Bulgaria's armored vehicles that they pledged to Ukraine are now sitting and waiting because they're asking the European Union and NATO to cover the transport costs. So interesting to see that that's been held back, but it's basically just a logistics complication. So we mentioned the other day that a North Korean missile was fired at Ukraine the other day. And they've now pulled together all the pieces and plotted out where all the components came from. 75% came from the United States. 9%, I believe, traced back to Europe. It's clear that Russia, North Korea, Iran are all reliant on Western capabilities and knowledge to be able to build their weapons. And how we are supposed to stop that in its tracks is a challenge, I think, that we're going to have to find a way to address. Because otherwise, they're just going to keep taking our Western components or our Western knowledge and using it against us. From the Washington Insider, new poll shows U.S. support for Ukraine is strong, with 73% of Americans saying that the war in Ukraine is important to American interests. Over in Estonia, 10 people were detained on suspicion of undercover activities in favor of Russia. It's clear that Russia's started stepping up their spy game again, and in spades. They've got spies and operatives all throughout Europe and into America, and likely in many places across the globe, because Russia realizes that they cannot head-on face the might of Europe and the might of America and expect to win. So they have to use their spies to undermine any support against them. So that's the situation that we're facing. That is the opposition that we are facing. Is Russia knows that they are at war, and it's honest to goodness, they know they're at war. They've been at war against the West for a long time. It's taken us this long to even realize that it is. Much like Iran's chance of death to America and their deliberate attempts to undermine U.S. and Western influence in the Middle East, Iran's been at war with the U.S. for decades. Maybe we ought to pay attention and notice. The United States has announced a large package of sanctions against the Russian Federation because of Navalny. The thing with this one is that if there were more sanctions that could be levied, why weren't they already levied? In violation of sanctions, Putin gave Kim Jong-un a limousine. He gave the dictator in North Korea an RS limousine in violation of those UN sanctions. So it's clear that North Korea and Russia are definitely working together. They're definitely supplying each other with whatever they want and working on their relationship. I guess bad guys of a feather stick together. From Jason J. Smart, without the restoration of U.S. assistance, Ukraine will have to decide which cities it can keep, according to the Pentagon. That's not a decision that any leader wants to make. In the area of things that will never be collected, an international criminal court ordered the Russian government to pay $50 billion in damages to shareholders of now defunct Yukos Oil. This is a company that was expropriated from the ownership of founder Mikhail Khodorkovsky, and they nationalized or basically absorbed it into the state instead, causing, of course, the loss for the owner instead. Estonia has successfully stopped a hybrid operation by Russia security services on our territory. We know the Kremlin is targeting all of our democratic societies, according to the Estonian Prime Minister. Going back to the situation in Germany, the tense situation between the coalition parties of the German government in reference to the Taurus missile has escalated into an open conflict. Member of the Parliament and Defense Committee Chair Marie Agnes Strack-Zimmermann of the FDP announced that she will vote together with the CDU-CSU opposition for the motion of a Taurus delivery. This comes only after a day when the government coalition announced to bring in a motion containing the delivery of long-range weapons to Ukraine without mentioning Taurus. Apparently that was not enough, and some won't have it anymore. What Schultz and his small circle of confidants are doing. So we've got a power struggle in Germany. Schultz is being basically accused of not providing enough support. Other parties are swooping in to say, no, you need to provide more support. Wouldn't it be nice if we could all just get together and get on the same page and work together to get things done? Biden has confirmed that a significant expansion of sanctions against the Russian Federation will be announced on Friday. So this is interesting, and I just noticed there's a post down here from Paul Healy. Secondary sanctions seem to be the next logical step. Secondary sanctions are designed to prevent third parties from trading with countries subject to sanctions issued by another country, even if these third parties are not citizens of the issuing country or based in this issuing country. They may face penalties for doing business with the targeting country or individuals. Basically, we're sanctioning those who are refusing to sanction Russia. At least that's my quick understanding. Interesting to look at, and that might be where the additional sanctions are coming from. All right, we're just about to move into the front lines here, so bear with me a second. I'm going to take a quick drink. I think I have a cat meowing at the door, but you know what, I'll let her in. So bear with me a second. I'll be right back. Hi. You just meowed at me. Don't bump any buttons. Ah. Off the keyboard. All right, sorry about that. Let's go ahead and get back to what we were doing here. Oof. Sorry, give me just a moment here. The cat's looking for my cup of water here. Can't imagine that she's actually thirsty, but we'll give her a little bit, see if she wants some. Okay, so back to what we were doing here. Let's get serious here. Another Su-30... Off the keyboard, cat. All right, you're going to be a problem, aren't you? Sorry about this. I probably shouldn't have let her in. But anyways, the Ukrainian Air Force reports downing another Russian Su-34. So we've got another aircraft that's been knocked down. They say the accompanying Su-35 maneuvered out of the way and ran away, basically. They're not coming back to take any more risks on this one. So interesting to see. That'd be the 7th aircraft that Ukraine has knocked out of the sky in just this last week, one per day. From Anton Herishchenko, 2024 is the decisive year. The Royal United Services Institute for Defense and Security Studies released a new report recently that says Russia will reach the peak of its capabilities at the end of 2024. According to the report, Russia is still confident it can reach its strategic goal and overtake Ukraine. To fulfill this goal, it will act in three ways. Continue pressure along the entire front line to deplete the armed forces of Ukraine of ammunition and personnel. Russian intelligence services will have to seek to break the resolve of international partners to reduce. Sorry about that. Cat sat on my little controller keyboard. It's going to be one of those days, apparently. The planning horizon for achieving these objectives, which are the basis for the formation of Russian armed forces and industrial production, envisages achieving victory by 2026. So that's the situation that they're looking at overall. Russia believes that they'll be at the peak of their performance in 2024, that they'll be able to continue major new offensive operations and seize new territories, and that they'll be able to do this while using their intelligence services to break the resolve of international partners to reduce military and economic aid to Ukraine. Ukrainian units of the Bulava strike. Okay, Cat. You've now done it. You got to go back out. You out. You got your drink. Time to go out. There we go. All right, that was your comedy for today, so I do apologize for that. I don't do that one again. Figured the cat would settle down after a moment and we'd be able to continue our talk uninterrupted. Let's see, did we close something here? Because I feel like... Okay. All right, yep, I think we're going to catch back up here, so I apologize again. Let's continue on. Ukrainian units of the Bulava strike unit of the Bohdan-Khmelnytsky Separate Presidential Brigade managed to find and fly FPV drones into a Russian warehouse. Among Russian losses are a BMP-T Terminator, 2 S-60 anti-aircraft guns, 2 T-72 tanks, a BMP-3, and 2 Ural trucks with ammunition. You would think that they might have learned that maybe doors would be a good thing to put up in their little warehouses. But you can see this just repeated attacks by various drones going in, finding a piece of equipment, and attacking it. And then towards the end of the video, you see the entire warehouse blazing on fire as the last one goes looking for a target to hit and manages to find one. This is an amazing bit of coordination and skill by these FPV drone operators. So really interesting to see happen. See, I think this is the last one right here, and they're going to go darting in just a moment. Actually, there's 2 minutes of this, so quite a bit more that could be seen, but I'm going to go ahead and just put the pause on that and move on to the next bit of frontline news. A Russian Lancet launcher was destroyed in the southern direction by a precise HIMARS hit, so they're definitely targeting anything and everything that's causing them trouble on the front lines. It's going to be a lot of desperate combat for the next while, and we'll talk about why in just a moment here. There was a HIMARS strike on a military training ground of the Russian Federation in the occupied Trudovsky Donetsk region. This is another one of those ones where a big general, somebody with big brass, comes in and says, okay, let's do a parade formation. I've got some talking to do. He shows up late, and the Ukrainians discovered the formation and put a HIMARS missile on it. It's almost like these guys don't learn from history. If you put together a formation of this type, it's going to get targeted, especially 9 kilometers from the front lines. It's not even hard to target. There's so many systems that could target that, It's absurd. They've confirmed 65 deaths. Further are likely to be found later. This is a Russian source actually from that was talking about it. That actually talks about this strike being carried out by 3 HIMARS missiles. So 65 dead out of theirs, no exact information on number of injuries. This is where that location is, near Donetsk, just south of Donetsk. And understand, the front lines are just a little bit to the west here. So it's not very far at all. And why did they think they could do this? I don't even understand it. A tremendous loss of life. This is a water treatment plant. I believe it's a water treatment plant or a water park. I wasn't really clear based on the original text. But this caught fire, possibly a drone strike in the Donetsk region, not absolutely confirmed. Defense intelligence update from yesterday. Within the past week, Russian forces have taken control of Avdiivka, as well as the coke plant situated to the north of the town, both of which have been heavily contested since October 2023 and have been on the front line since 2014. Ukrainian forces have withdrawn to defensive positions west of Avdiivka. It is likely that Russian forces lack the combat effectiveness to immediately exploit the capture of Avdiivka and will require a period of rest and refit. In coming weeks, Russia will likely seek to gradually extend its territorial control beyond Avdiivka, and we're seeing the initial signs of that already. That's a repeat of the previous. Russian actors conducted a cyber operation regarding Russia's seizure of Avdiivka, likely aimed at generating panic in the Ukrainian information space and weakening Ukrainian morale. I want to address this real quick. Yes, my cat was my sound technician, and trust me, she made sure that that all of my sound was not working properly at the right times. Okay. Interesting. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine where we ended up in context of a lot larger discussion about Ukraine, talking about Avdiivka. He called it the most important position in Ukraine. That's not true. Yes, it was a strong defensive point. Yes, it was bad to lose it. But in the end, they lost effectively nothing but flattened rubble because Russia literally just kept pounding it into dust. So losing the position in the end means that Russia's basically starting from scratch in rubble. That doesn't mean it won't be expensive to retake. That's not what I'm saying at all. But this piece of property is at this point no more valuable than an open field or a nearby city that the Ukraine wanted to hold on to. And so it's clear that this type of overstating the importance is already taking place even well into the heartland of America as people are looking at the situation in Ukraine. That is not to lessen the sacrifice, the loss, any of those things. I don't want to do that at all. It's just clear that the overstated importance of it is getting out there. Holding that position was good for Ukraine, but when it no longer became good for Ukraine, they pulled out of the position. Better to keep your people alive so they can fight another day than to fight over effectively flattened, destroyed buildings and territory. The tempo of Russian offensive operations near Avdiivka has reportedly dramatically slowed following the Russian seizure of Avdiivka. That's because the point of that whole operation was to provide Vladimir Putin with something he can point at right before the presidential election. That was the whole purpose of taking Avdiivka. It certainly was not strategically valuable for Russia at all. It provides no value, no resources, or anything additional in that regard. And yet it is still an important loss, important enough that Vladimir Putin can use it as his propaganda coup. It's not pretty, but it is what it is. The amount of losses that Russia took to take it are just staggering. One Russian propagandist who removed himself, I'll just put it that way, just recently stated that they lost over 16,000 soldiers dead only in Avdiivka. That'd be a Russian soldiers, 16,000, and that is likely an understated number. So interesting. And political war and politics, never a good mix. So the situation on the front lines. There's been a couple of changes here. The front line near Robotna, they've expanded the gray zone a little bit in here. So Russia's making some pushes from Novoprokopivka towards Robotna. Still have not gotten into the village itself, but it's very much a tough situation there. They're trying to take advantage of Ukraine's ammunition shortages and everything they can at this point in time. There is reports, I believe I've got another one a little bit later here that talks about Pobieda here, where Russia has actually taken this down. The deep state map still shows it in the gray zone. Otherwise, there's no significant changes to the front lines, at least immediately. Let's go ahead and go into some of the details here. The Russians were claiming that they had retaken Krinky. This comes from a video they put together where they managed to sneak a few troops in to a position in Krinky, put up the Russian tricolor, and briefly record a video. Then, if you look at the drone footage, you see those men running right back for the tree line as fast as they can. So it was a propaganda action, nothing more. Ukraine does them too, so both sides are going to keep doing these types of propaganda bits here, where they put a flag somewhere and then run away and giggle at it for a bit. Null reports as of yesterday confirmed the taking of Pobieda, and this indicates that Russians have restarted offensive operations in this area. The situation is difficult. Ukrainian reinforcements were sent to stabilize. But again, I thought I had more information on this. Hang on a second. There it is. Okay. Yeah, Russian forces have occupied the village of Pobieda south of Marinka and confirmed their taking of this village here. So we've got video footage of that, and that town has been taken. Just village. They're also trying to restart the axis near Volodar. A big mechanized column was completely annihilated by the Ukrainian forces, with nothing surviving. And Avdiivka, as you can see, Stepova has been placed completely in the gray zone with slightly more territory in Russian hands near Listochkiny. They've tried to attack Listochkiny several times in the past day, and each time they lose a tremendous amount of equipment and personnel. Talking about the Krinky situation, they managed to sneak their troops in there, get these flags placed, and then they ran away shortly after. And that's the situation on the front lines. I'm going to take a brief pause before I go into the interesting extras here. If you have comments or questions you want to go through, did I leave? Please tell me I didn't leave that there. Okay. I don't think I did. Yeah, I didn't. Before I go into the extras, if you have any questions or comments, please sound off. Let me know you're here. I appreciate everybody showing up for the streams. It's really nice, and I do really appreciate you being here. It makes all the difference. Give that old thumbs up if you enjoyed today's video, by the way. Let's go ahead and move on into the extras and see what kind of interesting things are going on outside of the immediate of the war. The president of Latvia published a post with a cartoon about Western supplies to Ukraine. You can see they've got these ammunition cases where there's rifles and machine guns in this one, ammunition in this one, but the others are just full of talk. Blah, blah, blah. That's their evaluation of Western support for Ukraine right now. Russian spies are back and more dangerous than ever, according to a post by the Royal United Services Institute. In the last 2 years, they were massively exposed in the EU and many special operations failed, but now they're entering a new phase of political warfare against the West. Russia knows that they cannot truly win a war against all of the Western nations. They can nuke the Western nations and then be nuked themselves, but they can't win a war against the West unless they can shatter the West, destroy NATO, destroy the European Union, and destroy America and force it into an isolationist phase. A Canadian family sold all their stuff in Canada and moved to Russia, thinking they would escape the decadent depravity of the gay West. Promptly, all their money was stolen, their accounts were closed and blocked. They complained about it online and were forced to apologize. And now they can't escape the country. Got to watch out for that Russian propaganda. It will absolutely tell you everything you want to hear. Provide the temptation to be a part of the Ruski Mir. And then you find out the real truth when you get there. Philosophy, this quote is interesting. The sign is actually about the availability of, let me see, hang on a second. I'm going to pull the grandpa style here of pulling out my cell phone and getting out the Google Translate. No crutches or prosthetics. There are St. George ribbons and Z stickers. Sorry about that. The quote, however, down here was really important to me. And that is, philosophy teaches us to question even what seems self-evident. Propaganda, on the contrary, proposes to consider as self-evident what one should think about, what it would be reasonable to doubt. And that is, I think, a lot of the trouble right now is in the information spaces, in the Twitters, the X's, the Facebooks, the all of those areas, the YouTubes. We are provided or presented information that is explained and claimed to be authoritative in all respects, where no critical thought is suggested, required, or even wanted. Here is the truth. And yet, we should always ask ourselves, is this information accurate? Does it actually match other sources, other places, my own experience, my own knowledge? And that's why I always invite you guys, and why I just realized I've had the wrong thing up for a bit here. There we go. Dang it, I am just not on my game today ever since the cat came in. So let's get this refocused here and get this on. The philosophy teaches us to question even what seems self-evident. Propaganda, on the contrary, proposes to consider as self-evident what one should think about, what it would be reasonable to doubt. And like I was saying, there's so much in the information space where people are presenting things as fact without showing any of the sources, without showing the information, showing the background behind it, showing other options, other alternative interpretations, or even discussing it or being open to debate or consideration. Well, it's just part of why I present my sources, and I'll often show multiple as I'm going through them. That does not mean that all of them are perfectly accurate. I try my best to provide the best information I can. But in the end, it's on you to ask that question. Is this truly accurate? Is it true? And I invite you to make that consideration and ask yourself that all the time. Every time, every piece of information, ask yourself that and put it through some rigorous filters. Because if you don't, you stand the chance of falling subject to propaganda. And not just Russian propaganda, but every propaganda. Ask the questions. Check information. And I'm going to end off with this video of this cat right here. Let me pause this for a second here. I've got to give some context. There's a group of women who are feeding the stray cats, the homeless animals, in these wartime conditions in Kharkiv. And I'm going to play it with the sound on and not comment through it. But even the animals have to deal with the traumas of this war. In the end, though, they've got to survive. They have to eat.
Боже, мама мія! Та скільки ж?
Оце в таких умовах
Кіцюля.
працюють харківські зооволонтери. Їж, не бійся, не бійся, не бійся, моя квіточка. Їж.
Кошмар.
Жах. О, Господи.
Їж, Кіцюля.
And that's what I want to leave you with on today's video. It's a quick pause here. Ozzy says, Russia did the same about Bakhmut. Yes, exactly. They overstated its importance once it was flattened to nothing. It is interesting that street fighting is not as good for the defender as it once was before the advent of drones. Ukraine like to open fields the Russians have to cross exposed. And yes, absolutely, the drone work has totally changed the nature of urban combat. On top of that, the willingness to absolutely flatten an entire city, I think, is uniquely Russian. The idea that you can just basically you destroy everything in hopes of ruling over the ashes. Russia's willing to do things that no other country is willing to do in order to carry out this war. Drones are an equalizer, but they make it so even territory that would normally be relatively tough fighting is now being almost stripped of its validity, stripped of its capability to protect. It's insane. Warfare has changed, and the world is changing because of it. And that's everything for today. Once again, if you enjoyed today's video, hit me with that old thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here and have never seen this before. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.